Welcome back, everyone. Great to have you here again. This week's Parsha is Parshat Mishpatim. We've had the narratives of Sefer Bereshit and the forming of a nation throughout the beginning of Sefer Shemot, culminating in the giving of the Torah last week. And now we enter what most of us see as, I would call, quote unquote, the regular Torah, which is the commandments, the mitzvot that we have. Parshat Mishpatim discusses a lot of what we call Mishpat Ivri, which is the Hebrew law regarding different judgments between people, different situations, guarding, damaging one another, but also there are some mitzvot that are also Ben Adam Lamakom. The holidays are discussed. So there's a whole collection of different mitzvot and laws that are discussed in our parsha, which really is the first parsha that follows the giving of the Torah on Har Sinai. The end of our parsha has a little bit of a narrative about the brit that was created between the Jewish people and Hashem. The famous words of Naaseh v'nishma are said there. I think it's a fun trivia question to ask where the words Naaseh v'nishma were written. I know that for a long time I would have answered in Parashat Yitro, which is when we were given the Torah, when we stood at Har Sinai, but it's actually from our Parsha. So there's a lot to discuss in this Parsha, but I want to first go at a high level and ask you, Abba, I think a lot of people, it's not necessarily so nice to say, but I think a lot of people find it very easy to connect with the parashot of Bereshit, exciting family drama, all the things we were lucky enough to discuss this year. Sefer Shemot, it gets a little bit more difficult, but at least the beginning has beautiful stories of Yetziat Mitzrayim. And then a lot of people, I think, during the course of these parashot, when we speak about the laws beginning this week, Parashat Truma speaking about the Mishkan, Tetzaveh speaking about a lot of the clothing of the Kohanim, a lot of people tend to lose inspiration. I want to ask you, are you able to connect with these parashot that are coming up in the latter half of Sefer Shemot, Sefer Vayikra, which of course speaks about sacrifices? Again, things that are very difficult for us nowadays to connect to. Does this happen to you? Is it difficult for you to transition from these parashot of stories, of narratives, to parashot of laws, of the nitty gritty, what really the Torah should be?
I think this question is not only about certain parshiot Shavua. Everyone who learns Gemara will face the same situation. Sometimes you have to go into minute and nuances, halachot, which are not something that will inspire you upon a first glance. You are not going to fall in love with a piece of Gemara that is very halachic in nature and sometimes even talk about topics that are not very likely to happen. But the truth is, and every person who tasted the sweetness of a piece of Talmud with a serious learning know that many, many times actually your appreciation of halacha, your appreciation of the great ideas come from understanding the foundation, the fundamentals of the halachot. So yes, in the first glance, it's not going to be something that is going to be as exciting as the parsha of Kriyat Yamsuf or Kabbalat Torah or the stories about the Avot. But really, the halachot, which actually tells us how to live our life, are all based on great ideas that we have to explore. And everyone knows from little children that the real joy in life is to discover things that you did not think you are going to find great things there. So if you go to a place that you did not expect anything and you met a person who is amazing or a piece of art which is amazing, it fills you with joy that is much greater than just living your regular life. And the same thing I feel many, many times by reading Parsha like Mishpatim or by learning Bava Kama or Bava Batra or Bava Metzia. the joy of discovery of great fundamentals in the halachot, to me, it's something that is many times greater than just reading the stories which are filled with inspiration.
Just to pull on that thread, I agree that, it's a lot harder and therefore often more satisfying to learn these tractates of Gemara that deal exactly with our Parsha, which we learned for, many, many years in yeshiva. But in terms of, like you said, inspiration, are you as inspired by it as you are when you're reading about our forefathers and about the formation of the Jewish people?
Again, it's a different way of inspiration. When you read the amazing stories about the Avot, it's the inspiration is right there. It's like very easy to get inspired. But the lasting inspiration is actually by learning the halachot and the dikduk, the special, the minutia of the halacha. What I found that it's harder. You not always discover the messages behind it. But when you discover and when you learn something, it will stay with you for much longer. And if you think about it, even inspiration like Yetziat Mitzrayim, think about Leila Seder. You might think that the inspiration will come just by reading the stories of Yetziat Mitzrayim, and we spoke a few times about the fact that actually we don't tell the story so much. The night is built upon two words, Tse Ulmad. Tse Ulmad is a very different method than telling a story as we know storytelling. It's actually learning. And you might be surprised because learning, especially for children, you want to do the mitzvah of V'higadet al bincha, learning might be something which is not going to impact so much the children around the table when you actually want to inspire them. But Chachamim knew something very important. Learning by itself, as I said, maybe the first time when you see it will not inspire, but if you learn it well, it will inspire you for a longer time.
I agree. And I think, again, you and I have been privileged to spend a lot of time learning these tractates. But what would you say to someone who hasn't had the chance to spend, years in yeshiva learning the laws of guardians or the laws of oxen damaging each other? And they, the same way that they were reading Parshat Vayetze, Vayechi, etc., now they come to Parshat Mishpatim. They don't have a year to spend on the ins and outs of the laws of Shomrim. What do you say to them? How can they find inspiration with a range of 1 week to really get into the Parsha?
Well, the truth is that there is no great answer to this. I will not be able, what we discussed so far is the ability to find inspiration in the minutia. But I wouldn't say that this is the case all the time, but there is something very important in life. People can get inspired and to feel really inspired and elevated by sometimes they heard like a rabbi speaking wonderfully and a great Russia. But when they go home, everything is fading and it's very hard to live life just based on inspiration. And the Torah says at the end of the day, inspiration just comes to serve and to infuse some fuel. But what is the engine? What are the wheels that are carrying the car? Eventually, it's the way you live your life. And the Torah in Parsha like Mishpatim is telling us many laws that after the inspiration of Kabbalat Torah and Kriyat Yam Suf, at the end of the day, we have to live with our family, with our friends, with the people that serve us. And the Torah wants to tell us, after everything, how we have to live our life from Modéani in the morning until we go to sleep. And yes, maybe it's not going to be, inspiring every moment of the day, but at the end of the day, this will be the fruit of all the inspiration, because we have to live life which are meaningful, which apply the values of the Torah of Hashem. And here is a wonderful handbook of what you have to do after the inspiration.
It almost seems intentional, and I think I've heard this message from you on a few occasions, that the Torah sometimes juxtaposes the most inspirational, the most climactic events in our history, like Kabbalat Torah. And I can think of, for example, and again, I heard this from you, the Akedah. The Akedah, if you look at the psukim immediately after the Akedah, with the binding of Isaac, it's the most technical psukim that Abraham took these wives and had these children, and the Torah almost intentionally always walks this line of great climax, great inspiration, and immediately follows it by the most unexciting passages. And maybe that's the message exactly, to know that the real life is not the climax. It's important and it's formed us as a nation, as a people. Really, what ends up mattering at the end of the day is how day-to-day life works. And the Torah intentionally, even when chronologically, again, it doesn't necessarily make sense, follows it up with there's great moments in life, but you should know life is really defined by what's not.
If you look in the Parshiot that we read, the Jewish people are crossing Yam Suf. I don't think that anybody who crossed Yam Suf sees such a miracle that naysayers say they live and well. They actually saw God in a certain way. They got nevuah. And 3 days after, they start to complain. They have no water. It's too difficult. They want to go back to Egypt. What do you see here? You see exactly that. That people can be inspired, but if they don't have a day-to-day life which are guided from the beginning to the end, the inspiration will fade away. There is no question about it. And indeed, what we see that when they arrive to Mara, שם שם לו חוק ומשפט ושם ניסהו. Hashem gave them חוק ומשפט, all kind of mitzvot. There is a מחלוקת what exactly were the mitzvot in Mara. But how the mitzvot in Mara are going to compensate for something that Kiryat Yam Suf itself, few days before, did not manage to achieve. And this is exactly the answer. Kiryat Yam Suf was one event of inspiration. Chok u'mishpat, the way you live your life, is much more important, and as I said, carry much more weight and inspiration, maybe in smaller doses, to your life. And therefore Hashem had to give them Chok u'mishpat in order to sustain the inspiration, although it was not as excited as the great inspiration on Yam Suf.
Let's speak about the Parsha itself a little bit. The Parsha begins with the laws of Eved Ivri, a Jewish slave. The Torah speaks about this in a few places, and the institution of slavery is something that the Torah seems to accept. One of the challenges that I've always had, and I know I'm not the only one, is that the Torah is presented to us as a timeless, infinite moral compass. And we know that nowadays, slavery is something that's abhorrent. It's a conclusion that people evolved into. And nowadays, no one in civilized society thinks that slavery is an institution that's appropriate. The Torah, as a guide to us, as a moral guide, um, I would think that even though it was given to us thousands and thousands of years ago, the Torah speaks about slavery as if it's a fact of life. And if we eventually know that slavery became something no one endorses, no one sanctions, how could it be that the Torah seems to be okay with it and has laws about it? Did the Torah see it as just something that was necessary? Slavery was an institution that existed at the time, and therefore it had to speak to it, but really the Torah doesn't want people to have slaves?
This is a very heavy question, and there are many approaches in Farshim, but As I said, I don't want to be bound to the Mefarshim. I want to open a discussion here, which I think is important. First of all, the perception we have about Avdut is because the slaves who came to America or to the free world came in a certain way. And what we cannot accept these days, and the Torah could not accept either, is kidnap people and using your power in order to make them subordinate to you. That's what the Torah for sure will oppose 100%. And every pasuk about slavery in the Torah is trying to not to abolish slavery, but to give some, or I would say to negate the differences in powers between the master and the slave. Now, if we want to be completely honest, slavery is when one person serves another person. The way we know it is based on what happened in America until actually the 19th century. And obviously, this was a sheer cruelty. There is no question about it. However, we have to think about in two aspects. One from the eyes of the slave, so to speak, and one from the eyes of the master. The system of one person serve the other one exists until the moment I talk to you. We don't call it slavery. Maybe it's a slavery in a cage of gold, but at the end of the day, many of us serve other people, and there is nothing wrong about it. On the contrary, I think that people who provide parnasa and livelihood to other people are great people. If you don't take the context of Avdut as cruelty and using power and give minimal condition to the worker and cheating him on his salary, Avdut means servitude. It's when I serve someone else. And that not only that it's not inappropriate, as I said before, it's a way to maintain ability of people to sustain their families and to accumulate wealth on the people who are maybe the masters or the people who are the employers of these days. As I said before, the whole idea of slavery became so disrespected because the way the slaves came here to America. But the Torah is talking about something very different. The Torah sees not, and I don't want to say this was something that happened 3,000 years ago. It can happen even today. The Torah here is dealing with inequality of power, of wealth, and the purpose of the Torah is to make the dignity of the person, regardless the question if he's a master or a person, to keep it in place. This is the purpose of the Torah, because society will always have this difference between the masters and the people who serve them. Let's not call them slaves for this purpose. And I think that the laws of slavery, if you read it in our Parsha, are just to highlight this idea that, and I would say not so much in our Parsha as much as, in Sefer Dvarim, we also have a very parallel Parsha to our Parsha with many differences, but we are not going to touch upon it today, that the Torah just show the master how we keep the dignity of the Eved by mitzvah of Hanaka, by the Isur to have him for too long. He cannot just use his power to have him forever, and so on and so on. So it's very, very different, I believe, than when people speak about slavery. it's a construct that we just have to break down, and I think it's not as terrible as we think it is.
I think Chazal take what you're saying to even further extents, and they have a lot of aphorisms about acquiring an Eved. One of the most famous ones is Kol hakoneh Eved kana adon, that the Torah places such requirements on the master that anyone who acquires an Eved, a slave, is really acquiring a master, which is a brilliant way to say that the Torah places such restrictions. And for example, if you only have one mattress, you have to give it to your slave. It's not just collapsing the power structure between the master and the slave. I think at the end of the day, the Torah is planting the seeds here for what we eventually know nowadays, which is that people really shouldn't have it. So the Torah, again, doesn't deal with an ideal society immediately, but it definitely, I think, plants the seeds here towards a society that doesn't have slaves by, again, making slavery essentially not what we know, like you said, from our experience and our exposure to slavery.
Yeah. And I think that even the employers of today, and maybe the employees too, should learn this parsha very, very carefully. As I said, the Torah is aware that society will always have people that are serving other people, and there will be masters who are served by these people. And what the Torah wants is to remember that behind the person who is working for you, there is a person, there is a human being that you must keep his dignity. And this is what this parsha is talking about. And a person can be employee and get $1 million a year, but he can be treated in a terrible way, and with no appreciation, and with screams here and there, or putting him under unbelievable pressure, or embarrassing him in front of other people. And the Torah exactly talking about this one. So maybe the setting of slavery is not as striking as it used to be, but the idea of keeping the dignity of a person who serves you and you are above him in terms of wealth and power is does exist until this very day.
Pleasure as always discussing the Parsha together, Abba, and I can say without irony that I found the discussion to be inspiring indeed. People will have noticed that you have a different background this week. You're in warm Los Angeles. Have a safe trip home, and look forward to speaking again next week. Shabbat
Amen.
Shalom.
Thank you very much, and Shabbat Shalom.